Oh, muy bien. Lisa, Wendy, Kira, Jared, good to see you all.
Hi, everyone.
Are we recording, Max?
Yes, we are. Sorry. I can't even get to the microphone. Yes, it's recording now. Sorry.
Okay. 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 So good evening and welcome to KTC, Southern California Weekly Sangha Gathering. My name is Jody and I am the director of KTC Southern California. We are happy to have all of you here from all different time zones this evening. We welcome you to log on to our website, ktcsocal.org, where you can find information on our center, upcoming events, as well as different levels of membership. You can also become a subscriber on our YouTube channel, KTC SoCal. Donations can be made to Lama Adam or to any of our teachers by following the link on the website or through the email newsletter announcement. This evening, we're pleased to welcome Lama Adam, continuing the series On the Wings of Wisdom and Compassion. And before we start, we ask you to please mute your microphones, and I will then go ahead and hand it over to you, Lama Adam. Thank you so much for being here this evening.
Thank you. It's good to see so many people. This is great. I have a hunch this has been an interesting couple weeks for a lot of us. And so I'm grateful that we can spend the time together tonight. And we usually start with a refuge prayer. So I think it's funny. I've seen so many. Like I've been to several seminars in the last week, like related to various mental health oriented kinds of things, and other things. And I was about to say something I've heard like 50 times in the last week and a half, which is this is going to be very timely. But I think this is going to be very timely. So refuge is something that we really need to contemplate. I mean, obviously, it's something we do and we say the prayer, but right before, I think it was maybe 2 nights before the election, I got in a really good dialogue with some friends about security and safety and protection and things like that. And luckily, we all have Buddhist connections, so I was able to make the connection to refuge and really thinking about where we've made the habits of refuge and what kinds of expectations we may have generated around security, emotional security, physical security, things like that. We have a strong habit of refuge before any of us even maybe found their way to Buddhism. We were already doing this, but not necessarily with the three jewels. So I think it's important first to make that connection that like as new as refuge may have seemed when we came to Buddhism, that was just putting a name on something we were already doing, potentially for many lifetimes. So it's worth thinking about where we go for refuge and and thinking that taking refuge in the three jewels is very different. In some ways, it's taking refuge in uncertainty. It's taking refuge in letting go of getting to know how things are going to turn out or expecting things to be pleasant or the way we want them to be. It's a promise to try to find security in uncertainty and to try to do it with loving kindness and compassion. And we're equally as capable to do that today as we were a year ago or at any point in time. And in fact, we could argue maybe even more capable right now. So this idea will come back up later, I think, in this session when we discuss the Shunyata protection slogan. But for now, just please make a mental note to contemplate this concept of seeking safety and security in Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, and how that differs from all the other places that we seek safety and security and refuge. And in particular, when you feel activated with the reactivity of passion and aggression, um, even and maybe especially very low grade versions of passion or aggression, such as like mild enjoyment and minor annoyance. What does it feel like in that moment to turn your refuge to the three jewels, or turn to the three jewels for your refuge. I say especially because there's a whole lot more of those moments of minor enjoyment and minor annoyance. But in those times, what does it feel like to turn to the two wings that we've been discussing throughout this whole series of the wings of wisdom and compassion? You know, what does it feel like to turn to awareness and kindness and openness, and just to be with that? So,
Mom, Adam,
yes.
I just wanted to add something too. I was listening to a teacher a while back talking about all these things that we have unconsciously or subconsciously taken refuge in, our job, our spouse, our home, whatever. They have no power to remain. They cannot and will not remain. So no matter what refuge we've taken, if it's not the three jewels, it will not remain with us.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. I mean, we can kind of, another way to think of it is we kind of take refuge in our own fantasy of, or like what we hope things will be. And then we expect everything else to align with that. And it hurts when it doesn't. So we really need to let go of whatever expectations of predictability, pleasantness, victories, and instead really, really turn to the teachings for our safety. And for compassion's sake, I think it's especially important as we get ready to say this refuge prayer to think of how many people have never even heard of the three jewels, much less learned anything about refuge as a habit, whether it's in the three jewels or in anything else, that dynamic of life. There's a lot of people that have never even thought about that. So we are incredibly fortunate to even be aware of this thing, this process of the way that we think and move through the world. We're incredibly fortunate. And so there's a lot of people who've never even heard about refuge or the three jewels. And then even beyond that, practiced it in any meaningful way, at any sort of, if you're here and you've learned about refuge and you've done the refuge prayer, I'm sure you've had your own journey with refuge. Like we've all had our journey of like uncovering like an onion, all the different layers of what it means and how it applies. And it's an ongoing practice, you know, and there's a lot of people that have never even, you know, taken that dry skin off the outside of that onion. So we really need to generate compassion for those people, because it's our good fortune that makes us aware of that. And similarly, it's also our good fortune that makes us incline towards goodness and incline towards kindness and incline towards wanting to protect and help and support. That is also a good fortune that we have. So really the only answer is compassion for everybody who doesn't have that. It's hard, but that's really, I think, the only option. So as we say this refuge prayer, I'll put it on the screen, but just recall we are so fortunate to be able to take refuge in the three jewels. And we can directly understand why others make the mistakes and poor choices they make based on their own sources of refuge, which are maybe not the three jewels, because we do that same thing a lot. So really just turn to awareness and compassion, wisdom and compassion. That's the two wings of the bird that we've been talking about. So I will put the refuge prayer on the screen and we'll chant once in Tibetan, once in Tibetan. I'm sorry, once in English, once in Tibetan, and again in English. I take refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha until I reach enlightenment. By the merit of accomplishing generosity and the other perfections, may I attain enlightenment for the benefit of all sentient beings. O Sangye Chidang Suki Chodnamra Changchu Padu Dagni Kyapsuchi Daki Jinso Kipe Sunamki Rola Penchi Sangye Druparsho. I take refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha until I reach enlightenment. By the merit of accomplishing generosity and the other perfections, may I attain enlightenment for the benefit of all sentient beings. I will say my own short prayer. Baden Sawe Lama Rinpoche Daki Jiwo Pediten Jula Kadun Chenpo Gonichi Sunte Kusun Tugi Ngudrup Sadhu So. Thank you. So just to recap where we are, this is the On the Wings of Wisdom and Compassion series on the Lojong teachings of Trungpa Rinpoche. The book I'm using as a source is Training the Mind by Trungpa Rinpoche, as well as some other sources too. But we have talked through the first 2 points and started the third point of the 7 points of mind training. And this point is timely, because it is transformation of bad circumstances into the path of enlightenment. So this is what you're looking for. This is it. So we talked last week about I recapped this last week, but I'd like to do it again, which is the 3 poisons, 3 or 3 objects, 3 poisons, 3 seeds of virtue aspiration. So take just a moment to read it. And just to recall,
Sorry, I can't see it. It's like a little patch above, it's like in line with all of your 6.
is everybody else having a tough time seeing it? It may be if you try to enlarge your Zoom window. I know that the Zoom window kind of like reorganizes itself when you enlarge it. Or you could try switching from the view, which I think is in the upper right. You could go from speaker to gallery or gallery to speaker.
I'm in the gallery, but I'm on my phone.
Oh no, you want to be on speaker then.
Yes, speaker.
I would switch to speaker because that would put just my screen on your screen.
How do I do that? I don't see a speaker. Oh, where it has the little sound sign.
It's
I
called
don't have that on my.
speaker. It's called speaker view, not speaker as in a sound sign.
And I don't have it on my phone right now, so I can't. Sorry, I can't give you
Maybe
a.
I'll just whip out my iPad and I'll have a bigger picture. Sorry, you guys.
Okay, yeah, no problem. So yeah, just to recap, 3 objects: pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral. This is like when we come into contact with our experience, it's one of these 3 things. And generally our habit is to meet something pleasant and to experience passion, to want to draw it in. When we meet something unpleasant, aggression, we want to push it away. And if we meet something neutral, it's apathy or ignorance. And it's important to note too that you're never going to have like passion without ignorance. Like ignorance is always present with these. So there's always like ignorance is always part of the passion, and ignorance is part of the aggression. But the most obvious things to catch are those moments of passion and aggression. And when we can apply awareness and compassion, or wisdom and compassion, the teachings, the Lojong teachings, we can experience, instead of the objects, they become seeds of virtue. So when we say 3 objects, 3 poisons, 3 seeds of virtue, the 3 objects are often turned into poisons when we are reactive about them. And then when we can let go of that reactivity, those objects become the seeds of virtue. So I just want to share that one more time because it's such a good practice, and especially that aspiration, which is also, I'm sure, on YouTube. So if anybody, Kira, if anybody else can't see it, I'm sure it's in previous talks and you can check this one again on YouTube. So I want to share that, but then the other thing I want to share is this is something I've been working on for a while. If you're following me on Instagram or anything like that, I've teased a few times that there's something really big that I'm working on for my nonprofit. And I haven't talked about this publicly yet, because KTC SoCal has been wonderful to me. I'm going to give you the scoop on this, which is I did a certificate program in the spring called the Moral Injury Certificate Program through Volunteers of America. And I want to introduce this concept to you because I don't think I've ever bumped into anything that was like pretty much purely a Dharma teaching, but in a completely different context. And this is the thing that we're working on for my nonprofit, which is bringing mindfulness and meditation training into underserved communities. And in particular, we're going to be doing this program to help the helpers. So it'll be like working with people in the social services to help them work with potential moral injury and prevent it. Because what I found out in working with this group of people who are like the leaders, the thought leaders in moral injury, and I'll tell you more about what that is in just a minute, but they use, in response to moral injury, mindfulness and meditation, but it's afterwards. And so when I asked the question, like, is anybody doing, mindfulness and meditation in these professions that are likely to have moral injury? And they were, but the response was, oh, like meditation as a preventative. And I was like, yeah, that's kind of what it's always been, really. So, so there's a wide opening for this. So I want to give you just a quick definition because I think this may also help processing things that may be going on right now for you too. So let me get this slide up here again. So the traditional definition of moral injury is a sense of betrayal of what's right by someone in a leadership position in a high stakes situation. And this is the initial definition. It's actually much broader than this. This was kind of the first definition by Jonathan Shea, who developed this whole idea. But I want to note too that someone in the leadership position can be you, and it could also be potentially a group of people or a large group of people. So moral injury was developed in military settings because you can imagine this would be rampant in that kind of a situation where people are dealing with their ethics and their values and being told they need to go against them, making choices potentially to go against them, and moral injury is the result. And why it matters is because we often see it alongside PTSD. So, and you can see here where the overlap is and where the differences are. So it's not uncommon to see these two things together, but they kind of need to be treated differently. And if we look at the moral injury side, particularly like sense of alienation from family community, meaninglessness, purposelessness, loss of trust and faith, futility and cynicism, resentment and revenge. And where some of that overlaps is like avoidance, depression, substance use, hypervigilance, guilt and shame, things like that. So this may be something that some of us are experiencing right now. And in particular, I also share Wesley Fleming, who's a military chaplain, developed this model that he calls the moral injury experience wheel. And I'm sorry, I know this is probably small, but you can see here in the middle, you'll see like the type of event. So like on the upper left, in the middle left, you see betrayal by legit authority. And then you see the like shades of emotion that can result from those kinds of things. On the right, personal transgression, guilt and shame. I think I've been both on the bottom of both of those, disoriented, appalled, and disgusted. And you see some of so this can just be helpful. I mean, sometimes just having a framework can help to work through these kinds of things. So if you're curious about this is called the moral injury experience wheel. And I wanted to just share this as a framework because moral injury is really about meaning making. Moral injury is about like our expectations about the world and whether they match like really like the best in us. And so one of the things that we're working on for my nonprofit is being able to, first of all, giving it a better name because there's a lot of baggage, I think, with the word moral. And I also think thinking of it as an event is wrong. Like this is a dynamic. Like we know from the Dharma that like it's the same thing that is the medicine is also the poison. Like we need to generate a wish for enlightenment. We need to generate some kind of aspiration to awaken, but that sort of wanting that kind of desire is also the problem. And so we need to titrate the dosage correctly. And the same is true of our morals and our ethics. And we need to recognize that like the wish to help people is valuable, it's precious, and we need to protect it and cultivate it. But we can also be too attached to it. And so the very thing that is precious here can also be the thing that hurts us. So I want to share that because this is something we're working on, and again, I think this may be timely, and I think this really is just the path of meditation in a lot of ways. It's just getting used to being able to titrate, what's the right practices to pick up, what's the right ones to let go, and how can you harmonize those. So just wanted to share that briefly because I think there's a lot of moral injury happening right now. And I just want to make the connection to special qualities in each of us, qualities that we've developed to care for others, and recognize that like they may be connected with some of the pain we're going through, but that doesn't mean they need to get thrown out. We just need to be more skillful and quite the opposite of throwing them out. We need to really, really cultivate them. And I remembered an analogy that Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche used. I tried to find it in one of the books, but I can't remember where it came from. But he used the analogy of bodhicitta, this mind of awakening, being like a flame. And what happens to a flame when things get windy? If it's a small flame, like a match, and the wind blows in, it's going to just blow out right away. But when we get a little healthier fire going and the wind blows, that actually makes the fire blaze more. And if you've got a forest fire going and the wind comes in, that's going to really blaze. So the more we can cultivate our bodhicitta, the stronger it gets. And we can't let it be just a match. We've got to be working on making that flame bigger. So keep that in mind. And if things feel windy, this is your time. This is your time to grow and flourish and really to care for everybody you meet. So let's jump into our first slogan for today, which is be grateful to everyone you meet. And I'll read you, so much of this book is just great. Trungpa's teachings are so amazing. So I'm just going to read what he says. He says, this slogan also is dealing with kunzop, or conventional reality. That is to say, without this world, we cannot attain enlightenment. There would be no journey. By rejecting the world, we would be rejecting the ground and rejecting the path. All of our past history and all our neurosis is related with others in some sense. All our experiences are based on others, basically. As long as we have a sense of practice, some realization that we are treading on the path, even one of those little details that are seemingly obstacles to us become an essential part of the path. Without them, we cannot attain anything at all. We have no feedback. We have nothing to work with, absolutely nothing to work with. So in a sense, all the things taking place around our world, all the irritations and all the problems are crucial. Without others, we cannot attain enlightenment. In fact, we cannot even tread on the path. In other words, we could say that if there is no noise outside during our sitting meditation, we cannot develop mindfulness. If we do not have aches and pains in our body, we cannot attain mindfulness. We cannot actually meditate. If everything were lovey-dovey and jellyfish-like, there would be nothing to work with. Everything would be completely blank. Because of all these textures around us, we are enriched. Therefore, we can sit and practice and meditate. We have a reference point, encouragement, discouragement, or whatever. Everything is related to the path. So there's literally nothing else to work with but our own experience. And this is something that has been rolling around in my mind a lot lately, particularly in the idea that enlightenment, like our idea of like enlightenment in pure realms, they may be the transformation of our experience, but They're not other than our experience. And I think that's a really important point. Like there can be a transformation that like reveals a pure realm, but it's not other than this. So I think in my mind, for the longest time, I was kind of, maybe not explicitly, but I had some idea that like I was kind of just going to like eject into an enlightened field of Buddhas or something. But it's so important to know like this is it. And I want to give a quick example. It's a little crude, but like I'm sure you've seen this before. I think it's kind of like this. Like this is the classic Rubens vase. So, you've got, if you may look at it the first time and see a vase, but then you notice there's two faces looking at each other, or vice versa. And it's important to note that it's not like once you know, like if you think it's a vase and you go, oh, it's two faces, it's not like you don't see the vase anymore then. This is both the vase and the two faces at the same time. And we can kind of shift our perception to see one or the other at a given time, but we also know now that those are both two aspects of the same thing. We're aware of that. And I think it's more like this. That's my hunch. So I would say just kind of like keep that in mind, because I know I've done a lot of kind of escapist dharma, maybe in a way is some way to call it, like thinking that I can just like get out of this, but like it's just not how it works. So Trungpa Rinpoche here introduces the phrase profit and victory to others, loss and defeat to myself. And he says that can sound terribly self-flagellating if you look at it the wrong way. But in particular, we're not talking about, he says, some kind of guilt, particularly like guilt like we would think of in Judaic or Judaism or Catholicism. Those are the two he mentions in particular. And he says, a lot of things we tend to blame others for are our own doing. Otherwise, we wouldn't get in trouble. How come somebody else doesn't get in trouble and we do get in trouble? What causes that? It must be something happening to us, obviously. And so there's something here to really, this contemplation is so key here. I don't think I've mentioned this enough lately, but the 3 stages of practice: listening, contemplation, and meditation. Listening is this part where we're just taking in a teaching. And we could do a little bit of contemplating now, but I would caution you, like when you do listen to Dharma teachings, to like temper the contemplation, because so often we're kind of like preempting the listening with the contemplating. If you think about your daily life, like I really have to try hard to not think about what I'm saying next when somebody's talking to me. Like I'm always kind of strategizing the next sentence or evaluating what they're saying. It's pretty rare that we just let information come inwards. And so that's really the listening step. The contemplating step, I mean, part of what's important here is to try to separate those two a little bit. But even more important is contemplation has to happen later. Like it has to happen. So like the things that we listen to, we have to actually do them later. I've started lately to do like a 10 or 15 minute end of day review for myself. Like I'm doing it in the computer, but like sometimes I just think it, but like I try to go through stuff I learned that day or talked about and just kind of revisit it to hope, so it hopefully sticks a little bit more. And I miss a day here and there, but I think it's a good practice. It's definitely helped me retain things a little more. And it also helps me to go deeper on ideas. So contemplation is, I think, best when it is afterwards, and with some time devoted just to contemplating a thing, questioning it, testing it. And then meditation is just meditation. I think a lot of confusion comes up about that. We're not meditating on an idea or meditating on a concept. We're just meditating. And I think about that as being like letting the waves settle back into the ocean. If a concept is a wave, when it pops up, we may examine it and look at it, but then meditation is just letting it all settle back in. And it's not like we're letting it go and it's going to be gone forever. It's just settled back into the ocean. It's still in there. So meditation is just meditation. But so this idea of profit and victory for others, loss for oneself, is worth contemplating. And in particular, it's worth contemplating the kind of fearlessness that can arise when we're okay with accepting some loss for ourselves and letting others have some profit. And how that relates to fear, like our own fear, and how we can let go of that, the more we're able to lean into taking on some loss, letting others have some profit and victory. Trungpa says, the slogan, be grateful to everyone, follows automatically once we drive all blames into one. We have a feeling that if others didn't exist to hassle us, we couldn't drive all blames into ourselves at all. All sentient beings, all the people in the world, or most of them, have a problem in dealing with myself. Without others, we would have no chance at all to develop beyond ego. So the idea here is to feel grateful that others are presenting us with tremendous obstacles, even threats or challenges. The point is to appreciate that. Without them, we could not follow the path at all. So those people who challenge us, who seem to be causing us trouble, are the ones pushing us onto the path of Dharma. And Trungpa mentions here one of my favorite stories, one of my favorite Dharma anecdotes, which is the Bengali tea boy. Does anybody know this story? It's a great one. So Atisha, one of the authors of this lineage, was traveling to Tibet and apparently had heard that everybody in Tibet was so nice and kind. And he wanted to bring with him someone who would challenge him to practice, would be a little bit of a challenge to be around. So he brought this Bengali tea server, tea boy, with him. Basically, I mean, this may be crass, but it's like I think he brought someone that was super annoying so that he would have to practice more often. And so amongst some of my Dharma friends, we will joke with each other that like who's being the Bengali tea boy today, you know? but yeah, so it turns out afterwards, Atisha said that the Tibetans were not as nice as he thought, and he actually didn't need to bring the Bengali tea boy with him. But yeah, so I think we can have those kinds of experiences. And granted, like we need to titrate and gauge our experience. Like we can definitely get out over our skis, and Trungpa addresses that too. But that's why I say like use the little versions, like the little annoyances. You know, one for me is like just like if I'm coming into a store or somewhere where there's a line with somebody else, like I try to let them go first because I want to go first. You know, like in me, I'm like, oh, I want to be first, you know, and I have to consciously go, nope, you know what, I'm going to let them have that. And it's a tiny thing, but it's something, you know, so there's all kinds of opportunities to do this sort of practice. Trungpa also says, if someone hurts you, you should be thankful to them for giving you the opportunity to practice, but you do not have to expose yourself to be hurt. That would be some sort of martyrdom. You don't have to ask to be hurt, but when you come up with such a situation, then all the things we discussed apply. It is not that you have to stage the whole thing. Instead, somebody will blame you, and then you will think, it is mine. You don't have to avoid such situations, and you don't have to cultivate them. You just lead your life being very sane, and you don't hurt anybody else. But if anybody happens to hurt you, then you know what to do. It is very simple. We're not talking about deliberately jumping on a sword. That would be a misunderstanding. Instead, you are making a close relationship with the person who is hurting you. He goes on to say, loss and defeat is not really pain in the fundamental sense. It is just a game. It is that you did not get what you wanted, so you feel somewhat irritated. The little things that go through our life always. It has nothing to do with real pain. We do not always get what we want, and we are always frustrated with that. We are resentful towards something or somebody, or even towards ourselves if we expend our money or if we run into somebody's car or anything of that nature. It is not really pain. It is just a hassle. This whole approach of dealing with all kinds of hassles and transmuting them and working with them as a workable journey towards enlightenment. We are not talking about fundamental pain. I think one of the problems we have, particularly in the Occidental mentality, is that we make too much of a big deal of the whole thing. We complicate the whole thing unnecessarily, and we have no idea how to play games properly. It is not a big deal. It is an exchange. And this is another thing I've really adopted, even before I was in Dharma, is like being playful with life, being playful with our responses, making it into a game. There's a great book by an author called Clay Drinko, Drinko, and it's called Play Your Way Sane. And it's like 100 improvisation games that you can do with yourself, with no one else in the world. And it's like all these little ideas of games you can play. No one even needs to know you're doing it. Like one of them I'm thinking of just off my top of my head is like I can't remember what he calls it, but it's like the rule is you have to compliment everybody you talk to, and it has to be genuine. So like anybody you talk to at least once, you have to compliment them on something genuine. And another one is like related to that is like you try to imagine what everybody's superhero name would be. So like anybody you bump into, you try to think of like, well, if they were a superhero, what would be their superpower? So these are just some basic ways of like playing with your experience. It's trying to bust us out of the habit that we've been in of hope and fear and expectation. So I like the idea of thinking of this as a game. And I mean, it's really important because he's right. We do take this stuff so seriously sometimes, and that can get in the way of of us actually just doing it and enjoying it. Like we talk about joyfulness, like there is joy in doing these practices. And I think we need to try to find that joy consciously even. Trungpa also points out that you can't do this without some preparation. So without working with our state of mind, we also need a basic understanding of the shunyata experience. So basic understanding of absolute bodhicitta and the relative bodhicitta. He says there is no ground at all to begin with. So anything that takes place in the groundlessness becomes workable. Those things are actually very powerful. Any thoughts on this be grateful to everyone slogan or
I love
games?
it. That
Yeah,
was my slogan today, funny enough. I had to go to
perfect.
Costco and I met like two lovely people who were so interesting. And, I just had this gratitude because I'd actually spent like practically the last 4 days inside in retreat.
Mm,
And and then when you go out in the world, you're like, is this going to be a hassle or, might this actually be a nice experience? You never know which way it might go. And it changes moment
yeah.
to moment, of course. But, like you said, it's been a crazy week or two. But I'm happy because I, I saw the review. I read where the 73 million trillion rather went. So I do think it was time for a change. But that aside, and so I just had this kind of joyfulness. And yeah, people hit me in the ass with their carts and all that stuff that happens in crowded places. But it was actually really delightful. And I had that gratitude for those, couple of people that we had a special connection, and we
Hmm.
actually, we spent like with one person, we spent like an hour and a half, talking. And then as I was leaving, I was starving and I got one of their terrible slices of pizza, but I sat down at one of those sort of wannabe picnic tables. And this other woman sat down there across from me. And it was just like synchronicity. And she was retired, but she had been a clinical psychologist and, you know, and had just moved back from Maui. And so it was really like interesting. And I felt like liberated to be out rather than, uh, very
On
much,
retreat.
yeah. And
Yeah,
and just that aloneness that you can feel after a week or so of that. So it was,
great.
yeah.
Yeah,
And
thank
then
you.
when I came home just very quickly, I had to take my dog out and he was so happy to go out. And so we like ran and walked and ran. And that was joyous. And I could see the full moon. It's a full moon tonight, everyone. And it's a
Oh yeah,
super
yeah.
moon. The full moon is tomorrow, but the moon looks full anyway. So,
Good, good. Well, thank you.
yeah,
Yeah. And I think that's a great way to think about to make a connection from meditation too. I mean, the science now on neuroplasticity shows that like each time we come back from a distraction, that's what's actually cueing the new neural nets. That's what's helping us make the literally like the connections of awareness in our mind. So similarly, when someone I think trigger is sort of a loaded word, but when somebody cues our reactivity in the world, and we can actually generate a little gratitude because we're aware in that moment and are able to practice some compassion. That's sort of like coming back from distraction. And similarly,
yes.
when we notice a distraction, we're coming back. Like we can be grateful for that. And so that's a great example. Yeah, I want to move on because we've got one more slogan I want to get through today, and it's a doozy. So this next one is seeing confusion as the four kayas is unsurpassable shunyata protection. And I'll read Trungpa's teaching on this because it is so good. I felt like I don't think I really had any idea about the kayas until I read this. I'd heard so many different ways of people explaining the kayas. Kayas, if people don't know, kaya means body. So we're talking about here about like the four bodies of a Buddha. And Trungpa says, in the slogan, seeing confusion as the four kayas is an unsurpassable shunyata protection. The basic question is whom to protect, what to protect. All sorts of other questions are involved as well, but basically we are talking about having an understanding or realization of the way we perceive things as they are. In perception, first there will be a sense of waiting or openness. There may be uncertainty as to how to perceive things, not knowing how to make a particular situation graspable. Then we have a clear idea of how to organize things. Thirdly, we begin to make a relationship between the two. And finally, we have a total experience of the whole. That makes four states of mind that we go through, four stages of mind or mental process. These four processes are related with the four kayas, Dharmakaya, Sambhogakaya, Nirmanakaya, and Swabhavakakaya. The Dharmakaya nature of our reaction to the world is usually uncertain, bewildered. Strategies are not yet formed. Planning is not completely organized. It is just a sense of basic openness. The Nirmanakaya aspect is the second stage of this process. At this point, there is some kind of clarity in which we have a basic grasp of the situation generally. And in order to make a link between the uncertainty or openness and the clarity, we need some Bogakaya, which bridges the gap between the two and joins them. So the Dharmakaya and the Nirmanakaya are joined together by means of the Sambhogakaya. According to this particular tradition, that is the realistic way of looking at things. So Bhavakakaya is understanding the whole thing, total panoramic experience. When we begin to flash our mind to an object, when we have a grasp on it, when we begin to realize some kind of link between the kayas, that totality is what is known as Svabhavakakaya. So the way I don't want to say that yet. But I do want to give you a quick like visual metaphor for this. And this is a metaphor. It's not perfect at all. But like I would invite you, like if you were meditating with your eyes open, to have sort of a downcast gaze. You can follow the bridge of your nose to a spot somewhere in front of you. And just take a moment to notice what a really small area we actually see in our field of vision. I mean, I think maybe like the size of a penny is the only thing I'm really clearly seeing, and the rest is all kind of peripheral. So if you imagine the whole field of your whole field of vision as being like Dharmakaya, and then that little penny, that one thing you can clearly see as Nirmanakaya, and then Sambhogakaya being what kind of brings those two together into relationship. And those three things are from the point of view of multiplicity. We're thinking of these aspects as three things. But if we think of all of those in union, that's what we can think of as Swabhavakakaya. So it's from the view of unity.
Adam, please repeat that, the four aspects.
Yeah, do you mean what I just said or Trungpa's?
What you just said for this practice.
Yeah, so so I would say like think of like the entirety of the field of vision as like Dharmakaya.
Oh yeah.
And then that precise or practical clear spot that's right in the middle of your vision, that's like Nirmanakaya aspect. Sambhogakaya is the relationship between the two. And so Bhavakakaya is all of that, like without the multiplicity. It's just from the view of unity or union. Is that helpful?
Yeah, thank you.
So, and this is also like a great way to solve problems. I mean, this is really kind of how I came to think about the kayas eventually. It's just like when I've got a situation, that I've got to deal with, I try to parse out quickly here. Okay, like, well, I'm maybe stuck. Often I'm stuck on the Nirmanakaya. Let's just be honest. Like often I'm stuck on like the very immediate, practical, tiny thing. And I need to actually recognize there is a whole space around that. There's just an entire openness happening. And so just connecting with that sometimes can help a lot when I'm really focused on the Nirmanakaya aspect, the practical, precise aspect. And then once I'm able to kind of zoom out a little bit, then I can make a relationship between that broad openness and that precise spot or the precise thing I'm working on. And then hopefully then I can kind of recognize all as one thing, just one process. And in fact, it's a very normal process. It's just kind of how things are. And we haven't gotten there yet. So I want to read one other paragraph here. He says the Sabhavakakaya is a general state of existence, and that state of mind also contains what is known as transcending birth, cessation, and dwelling. Transcending birth means that transcending birth means that thought process does not come up. There is no such thing as the birth of a mind or the birth of a thought taking place in our state of being at all. There is just simply existing and opening. Transcending cessation means that no thoughts actually subside unless they are replaced or overlapped by something else. And transcending dwelling means that thoughts do not dwell anywhere, although there is some kind of occasional something. So the idea of Sabhavakakaya is seeing beyond the birth, subsiding, and dwelling of the thought process. But here's another way to think of that model. Dharmakaya is thoughts have no origin, they're unborn. Nirmanakaya is nothing is really happening, so thoughts don't actually dwell. Sambhogakaya is thoughts don't go anywhere, they're unceasing. And Swabhavakakaya is connected with no birth, no acting or dwelling, and no cessation. So the way the four kayas are protection is we begin to learn our state of being, the process by which our mind functions. Trungpa says everything is always in accordance with the four kayas. Everything is always in accordance with the four kayas. Although we might not regard our own mind as all that transcendent and enlightened or awake, its pattern is still that of the four kaya principle. And he says, this slogan might seem slightly obscure, but it has to do with the absolute bodhicitta concept of understanding your mind by studying and watching yourself, and by practicing shamatha and vipassana. By practicing those disciplines, you begin to realize that the essence of your mind is empty, that the nature of your mind is light and clear, and that the expression or manifestation of your mind is active. That realization can only come about when you are sitting on the cushion. Only on the cushion can you see that your mind has no origin. There's no place from which thoughts arise as far as you can judge by looking at them. You also have no idea where your thoughts go. Thoughts just come, they vanish, and disappear. Furthermore, you also have no idea where your thoughts dwell, particularly when you have developed a basic sense of mindfulness and awareness. As you continue to practice mindfulness and awareness, the seeming confusion and chaos in your mind begin to seem absurd. You begin to realize that your thoughts have no real birthplace, no origin. They just pop up as Dharmakaya. They are unborn. And your thoughts don't go anywhere. They're unceasing. Therefore, your mind is seen as Sambhogakaya. And furthermore, no activities are really happening in your mind. So the notion that your mind can dwell on anything also begins to seem absurd because there's nothing to dwell on. Therefore, your mind is seen as Nirmanakaya. Putting the whole thing together, there's no birth, no cessation, and no acting or dwelling at all. Therefore, your mind is seen as Swabhavakakaya. The point is not to make your mind a blank. It is just that as a result of super mindfulness and super awareness, you begin to see that nothing is actually happening. Although at the same time, you think that lots of things are happening. Realizing that the confusion and the chaos in your mind have no origin, no cessation, and nowhere to dwell is the best protection. Shunyata is the best protection because it cuts the solidity of your beliefs. I'm going to jump back to this slide one more time, just to, if you want to take one more look at this set of characteristics. So today is really a refuge theme, a protection theme in a lot of ways. We got some actual method in being grateful for everyone. We got a framework to approach thoughts in our thought process through the kayas. If you find it helpful to look into moral injury, it's funny because I feel like that whole field is like they're just trying to find dharma, but they haven't, and so they're trying to reinvent the wheel, and they're like stuck on like aggression and passion in their most extreme forms and calling it an event, and it's like, ah, oh well, we'll help them. We'll help them and we'll help everybody. But it's funny because it is a new field and it is rampant. And I will before I open it up for some questions too, I will say too that like I met someone the other day who was working on weaponization of collective moral injury in Africa by private military groups. So, and that weaponization of collective moral injury, I was like, oh, I think we may be seeing some of that. If you think of like the effects of moral injury and collectivizing it again and again, people seeing things that run against their values, and that potentially leads to like giving up, not caring, not being involved. I think whether people know it or not, there are any number of people who have jumped on that weaponization of collective moral injury thing. And I think sometimes just knowing about it can help us counteract it. And I think this is entirely related with Dharma. So any questions?
Do you have a link to that? I'm interested in reading about that. Thank you.
Yeah. Let me see. To the collective moral injury thing?
Yeah. What
in particular?
Yeah, and what they're doing in Africa?
Yeah, let me send you. I know she what is her name? Asala. I'll put her name up because she gave a lecture and she said the lecture would be posted soon. So
Okay.
she's at the University of Durham. I'll put her name in here.
Thank you.
Katache, and she's at Durham University. Really interesting work. I mean, and oh, How do I send it to the group? There we go.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah, and I mean,
Thanks.
I really think this is going to be, I mean, part of why I'm so excited about this for my nonprofit is like, I think this is like a systems change level thing. I mean, if in these places where moral injury is so likely to occur, which is really any space where moral responsibility is high,
Mhm.
if we can be in there, you know, helping people prepare through mindfulness and compassion and awareness of like our values, and maybe even running like mental scenarios of like how in one specific job there might be just morally distressing events that could potentially add intensity, be moral injury. This can change, like this could change the whole world, I think. But you know,
Love
like
it.
whether it's healthcare or child services or you know, the military or prisons. I mean, there's just so many places where this is a problem. I mean, it's kind of like I mean, it's really just the hum of really it's the objects and the poisons and the virtues is another way to think of it. I'm still kind of trying to get the language and all the, you know, all that stuff put together. That's why I haven't really talked about it much, because I feel like I don't really have the right way to describe it in a concise way yet. But I am super jazzed. So yeah, you might want to check it out, because I think we all deal with that dynamic, and it helped me to just have some different kind of language to think about it.
Lama Adam, in regards to this, and I don't really want to get too much into politics, but you're saying this is a great time for this. Well, last Tuesday night, I woke up after midnight and I immediately looked at my phone to see what was happening, who was going to be our next president. And when I saw the outcome, I was devastated and in disbelief. So much so I didn't go back to sleep. And I sat there and I went into my meditation room / study. And I literally sat there and thought about the two differences. There was hope, and one, you know, one party had hope and really pushed hope, and the other party was full of vitriol, and it was really difficult, and that was the party that won. And so a lot of this is hitting home with how to help myself come up with a way to deal with that. And I remember for most of the night that I didn't sleep was thinking, how exactly am I going to make it through these next couple of weeks until I'm able to just accept what's happening and put that behind me? And I'm still struggling with that. So can you talk a little bit towards that with everything that you're teaching tonight, how to look at things?
Yeah. Well, I think both really kind of all that we talked about tonight are ways of when habits of thinking come up, these are some strategies to deal with them. I mean, I think the obvious one is like tong-len. I mean, I think anybody would say do some tong-len, and I don't mean to make it sound like it's nothing. It's very
No.
important. But I think I think of what's really helped me a lot is tuning into my senses and letting go of the need to plan or think at
Right.
all about this stuff. And when I say tuning into my senses, I mean not like this is actually related to the vase and the faces. Like it's not like I'm trying to not think about how I'm feeling. I'm trying to feel how I'm feeling, which is a different thing. You know, like I'm looking for, you know, like my initial reaction is always going to be like, oh, this is anxiety, you know, but I'm going like, no, I'm gonna let that go. Where is this anxiety? What am I labeling anxiety here? Oh, it's my chest is like a little tight. My shoulders feel stiff, you know, like, and I kind of just tune into that. Like I'm really like literally tuning into the senses and tuning into things I hear, and really just sort of having a more meditative approach in general, because I don't feel like I have a lot of resources right now to do a ton of thinking. And I think there will be a time when that will come along. But yeah, I think the main thing would be just like tune into the senses. And I mean, again, like tong-len is a sort of go-to simple option. meditate is another kind of simple option, but those things are not always, it's not always the right time to do those. And I think a lot of times when we are really anxious or thinking a lot, then the meditation just becomes difficult and thoughts are coming up. And I think we need to be gentle with ourselves as far as that goes. I want to give you a quick practice because this is I'm stealing this from David Treleaven from the Trauma Sensitive Mindfulness Institute. But this is, I think, explains what I think is the way to treat ourselves right now. So you don't have to hold your fist up. I'm going to do it so you can see. But everybody make a fist and imagine that this fist's job is to keep you safe, to protect you. And then the first phase of this practice is try to open that fist up. This fist's job is to stay closed. This hand is trying to open that fist. And be mindful of how you feel when you're trying to do that. Pay attention to your breath. Pay attention to the narratives that come up. And then let it go. Maybe shake it out. And phase 2 is make that fist again. This fist's job is still to keep you safe. And then this hand, now its job is to provide compassion and care and show respect. And so we're going to put it under the fist. And notice your breathing. Notice what you're feeling. Notice maybe the fist loosening up a little bit. I think that's how we should be treating ourselves right now.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Good. I see we're at time. I'm not in a hurry, but I don't know what schedule is here. I can keep going or we can call it a night. Up to you all. All right. Well, let's say the prayer of dedication together. Thank you all so much. I'm really grateful to spend time with your Sangha all the time. And I meant what I said earlier. I mean, you Santa Monica KTC, now KTC SoCal, has been with me, this basically the whole time I've been teaching for the most part consistently. So I really appreciate that opportunity to be in community with you. So I will share.
I did want to mention something else. I've never heard of this moral injury before. And a few years ago, I had never heard of nonviolent communication. And of course, we've known about the mindfulness movement now for many years, but it's really interesting that there's so much research now on mind and emotion. And my wife and I just watched a movie called Sensitive, the movie. It's an 1.5-hour documentary about highly sensitive people. And the stuff researchers have done to find that 20% roughly of the population are highly sensitive, but most people don't know it. And when they withdraw and have tantrums and when they feel burned out, a lot of times they just can't recognize that they're highly sensitive and need they need a lot more downtime than the rest of us. Really fascinating. I recommend it. It's called Sensitive, the movie.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. That also reminds me too, just to give a little bit more context than what I said to Wendy is, speaking of research, that there's research that I think a lot of times we assume anxiety and depression increases when when our mind is racing or we're distracted. But what they've actually found is, regardless of where that is in terms of a racing mind or distracted mind, what actually causes anxiety and depression to increase is disconnecting from our senses. So you can test this. You can test it for sure. Like, you don't have to wait till your mind calms down. You just tune into your senses, and that will inevitably start to lower the anxiety and the depression. Joseph, I see your hand.
Yes, on the line of the sensitivity, the highly sensitive, there's something that people may want to look into. It's called window of tolerance. And this comes up a lot in couples therapy, but it has to do with trauma. And people who have experienced trauma have a very small window of tolerance. And they can either go into volcanic eruption or total shutdown, or both. And it's similar to the hot and cold hell realms, the hot of volcanic and the cold of shutting down. So I think that if you just Google window of tolerance, you'll find some interesting diagrams and see that whether it's, I don't know if it's the 1% natural of the population, but people who have gone through trauma end up being subject to, it shrinks their window of tolerance.
Yeah, thank you, Joseph. Yeah, there's if you're curious too, I did a series called Resilience and Resourcing on the Buddhist Path, where we went in depth on the window of tolerance and the learning zone with diagrams and everything. They're on the KTC SoCal YouTube channel. But yeah, that is a really great model. And I think it's important to note too that you can change your window through practice. Like it is possible to widen the window. And in a lot of ways, that's what we're trying to do with Dharma practice. But it's also important to note when we're outside our window. When we're outside our window, it's probably not a good time to keep pushing more and more. So it is really important to tune into that window. And if you do like go back and watch that teaching I did last year here on that, you'll see that there are strategies to work with all of that, and you'll be able to figure out how to actually make that a practice. I mean, that's the first thing I do whenever I hit the cushion. And it's not different from things other people have told me or other teachers have told me. It's just a kind of a different framework for it. Because a lot of times we say, take a couple breaths and just notice how you're feeling. That's it. That's the window of tolerance. What are you bringing into the practice today? And I would also say it relates with what I think Joseph said was like hot and cold or explosive and icy. I think that also relates with torpor and dullness versus like agitation. So mental, states that the spectrum that we move through at any given time. And so this is all, it's funny, like I think window of tolerance is in the Dharma for sure. It's just we've got new words for it now. But I think it's been there and it's always been there. And so I'm glad we're making the connections now.
My encounter with someone close to me with a very small window of tolerance, when they go outside the window of tolerance, they are not aware, they cannot be aware of what they're going through, and you can't communicate with them. So it's only after they come down. So it's too late when they've gone outside and into eruption or shutdown.
Yeah. And it's worth remembering too that when we talk about mindfulness, really mindfulness does not just involve your own body. And if we're doing it right, we're aware of how other people are doing too. We can't always guess how they are, but like I think a well honed practice of mindfulness also contains other people's demeanor, and motions. And when we can tune into how they're doing, and if we have a sense that they're outside their window, these are ways that we can also become more aware and compassionate in a very practical way. So let's say the prayer of dedication together. We'll do, there'll be 2 stanzas here in English. And I would say just like, as we make this dedication, let's keep in mind everyone who hasn't connected with teachings that can help them know themselves, know their thought processes, understand how to flourish. They haven't found a teacher, they haven't found the teachings, they haven't found the community that will support their flourishing, and in turn the flourishing of the world around them. And let's say this dedication prayer for all beings, but particularly for those folks. By this merit, may all beings obtain the omniscience of Buddhahood and defeat our common enemy, wrongdoing. From the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death, may we free all beings. The courageous Manjushri, who knows everything as it is, the Mantabhadra, who also knows in the same way, and all the Bodhisattvas, that I may follow in their path, I completely dedicate all this virtue. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Lama
Thank you.
Adam.
Thank you, Lama Adam.
Take care of yourselves and take care of everyone around you.
Thank
Oh,
you.
thank
See you
you.
soon.